Ladies and gentlemen, what we're trying to do, and we're a long way from it, is to make children the #1 priority for decision makers in Florida. How is it possible that we can't get but $3,000 for a slot in the state's pre-kindergarten program? We pay upwards of $50,000 to incarcerate a juvenile. In a state of wisdom and in a country of wisdom, children would be the highest priority of elected leaders, higher than roads and prisons, and frankly, higher than anything. Why would we settle for anything less than affordable, high-quality basics for all children, meaning the exact same quality basics any of us would want for our own children and for our grandchildren? Why wouldn't we want this for all children? I regard this as simply the American dream, and I believe that we need to be a people good enough to make sure every child has the quality basics. So yes, I regard it as a moral issue, but it's more than that. We live in a country where a full half of this country's high school students lack the written, spoken thinking and problem-solving skills that employers these days demand. I hear an awful lot from business executives complaining about the quality of graduates, little knowing that the answer could not possibly be found in the 4th grade or the 7th grade or somewhere in high school. Instead, the fix, if you will, can be found where the most extraordinary return on investment occurs. That is in the years before birth, all through the early childhood years up to age 8. If we ever got those years right, a child, chances are, would have momentum all his or her life. And I don't want you to tell me to wait, that times are tough, that children will have their turn. I don't believe it. I was a paid skeptic for 35 years at 7 newspapers, but not a cynic. Children were never enough of a priority in even flush times in this country. And don't tell me we cannot afford to do right by children. How desperately short-sighted it would be, how foolish for the very future of America. And don't tell me we don't have the money, and don't interpret this statement as political. Don't tell me we don't have the money if we can spend $400 million every single day of this year and last year and probably next year to bring democracy to Iraq and Afghanistan. If we could do that as a country, we surely could do a lot better by our children. One of the columnists I particularly like appears in the New York Times regularly. It's a man named David Brooks, who wrote, quote, "The problem is not that America lacks resources. The problem is that those resources are misallocated. To do better, you and I are going to need to build a real movement for children, a movement being defined as being about everyone's child, must build the parental awareness so parents know what their children need to do to reach their highest potential. We're going to need to build the political will. It is all there, in my estimation, to be done. It can be done. Indeed, I think it has to be done for the sake of the children and of the community and the country. Thank you. May God bless all our children and all of us." Thank you.
Any questions?
This happened to Lincoln after the Gettysburg Address. No one applauded, and no one did anything, and he thought he had failed. So I do not claim to be Lincoln, believe me, and I do not want to be thought of, although he is my favorite president, yes.
John Shimano of the American Humane Association. Just if you could talk a little bit about what's going on in your state, some of the kind of the struggles that are going on there. I just read that the state's rejecting the home visiting money.
I think it is. There's a story today. You probably passed it on, didn't you, Bruce? Story today, I think it is scandalous. how you pass upon money out of some, didn't the Senator Menendez talk about ideology? It's about ideology. We have folks who are so bound and determined that the Health Reform Act can't come to be, that anything associated with it won't come to be either. I am being polite when I say it is shameful and scandalous and unacceptable. And frankly, my hope in America is a bunch of people are going to overreach and going to get slapped back, because this country works best not on one end or the other. Works best in embracing everyone. So my answer is just terrible what has happened.
So just for people who don't know, there's money in the healthcare reform bill, but also providing funding for child abuse prevention, and the state of Florida is saying they may not take the money because they don't want any money associated with ACA, even though it has to do with child abuse and prevention. So,
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Katherine Gale, America's Promise Alliance. My question is, with Florida having such a high military population and the Department of Defense not being equipped to care for all those children, how does Florida prepare to take these children, especially as so many parents are about to return from their deployments abroad?
Say the last part of it again, I'm sorry.
Especially as so many parents are coming back from deployments abroad, and these kids are especially vulnerable.
You know, the sadness, we do have a large military population in several corners of the state. I happen to believe, and if you think otherwise, look further, folks. I happen to believe the American military is probably the single best meritocracy in this country. If you spend any time with the American military, it is stunning what you see in terms of who's in charge and so forth. I think that we, you, me, lots of other folks, generally know what is right. I think we haven't figured out how to aggregate power. So I have, for instance, conversations with Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. I'm figuring out ways that we can use those folks. The study I talked about called Mission Readiness came from them. Our challenge in Florida, and I regard, though this is a national discussion today, an enormous amount of power is invested in local communities. When I live in a community that's larger than 16 states, I spoke yesterday morning in Wyoming. Wyoming is 1/4 the population of my county. That an awful lot of power exists in states and exists in communities, and if you could show what could be done there, you could show otherwise. What we're trying to do is, it would be my answer to the question, help people to understand the power they have within them to affect change. Because what happens, we have 160 members of the Florida legislature, 40 in the Senate, 120 in the House. I promise you, I'm not being cynical, they all love children. Doesn't get us anywhere. We need to know the lessons of history. I'm not smarmy about this, but I have read a book a week since I was 6 years old, and sometimes several. More history and biographies than anything else. What do you know about the lessons of history? It wasn't accomplished principally by goodwill, never was. There were people of goodwill who did great things, but you do not accomplish things without pushing and shoving. And all the things that people talk about, whether it's the civil rights movement or the feminist movement or the Social Security or women voting, I'm old enough to remember the modern incarnations of a number of those. It was people pushing and shoving and thought to be radical. They weren't radical. What they wanted was an American sense of equity. So what we need to do is figure out how to aggregate significantly more power and do it in the spirit of bipartisan and nonpartisanship, but do things the way that folks do to work the system. You know what I mean. Anybody else? Thank you all very much.